Good evening, everybody. Welcome. I believe that this is session number 45. That blows me away. It's been almost 3 years since we've been doing these things. We have a very special set of guests tonight, Mike and Matt Blaum. We're going to be talking to them very shortly, but a few housekeeping things beforehand. Mike, Matt, will let you know that we usually run these for about an hour, okay? And then afterwards we adjourn to, an after party. You are more than welcome to hang out with us after that after party. Everybody, want to let you know that we have put the order of the whiskeys in the chat. Okay, everybody should have 4 whiskeys: the straight bourbon, straight rye, the apple brandy aged rye, and the cigar bourbon, the 6-year cigar bourbon. So that's the order we're going to be doing these things in. And one thing, if for those of you who don't pay that much attention to these things, if Mike and Matt look familiar, it's because we actually interviewed them in the summer of 2020 before we were providing samples. So Matt and Mike, one thing that's really great here, thank you for the samples you provided, because we were able to get them out to a bunch of people. And even people who aren't joining us tonight, they're still going to drink the samples, and they usually watch they'll watch the recording afterwards. So we're getting this out to a bunch of people. So everybody, I'd like to welcome you and introduce you to Mike and Matt Blaum. Mike, why don't you introduce yourself and tell us what your role is at the distillery?
I'm Mike. My role at the distillery, chief distiller, chief blender, head of production. And then, as you know, owners of any business kind of get their hands involved in everything, like employee infighting and what else did we deal with today?
Does the alcohol help or hurt the employee infighting?
It makes it easier.
Very nice. Matt, what about you?
Go ahead, Matthew.
I clean the bathrooms. I do sometimes, actually. No, I guess I handle the sales, marketing, overall business side of things. Mike and I have kind of a nice yin-yang thing going on where, he oversees all the production, but yet when we have new products, we both taste through them together. I oversee all the business side of things, yet when we make big decisions, we do that together. So we kind of have our own swim lanes, but we overlap quite a bit.
How did you guys decide that that one of you would be more involved in the business and the other one would be more involved in the production? It was just that naturally how you grew up, that one of you was more business minded and the other one was more about tinkering and stuff?
I think it was pretty organic, pretty natural. I mean, Mike is probably more of the tinkerer and really got into the science behind distillation, a long time prior to us even opening up. And I have an MBA, went and got an MBA. So I gravitate more towards the business side of things. Mike's, he's got a way better palate than I do when it comes to blending. It's true. And I have no problem saying that, but we both have our strengths and our weaknesses. And when we come together, everything's better because of that.
And I think that's how we're able to work together, because everybody asks that, but we're not butting heads on whose swim lane is what. We kind of have our interests, and it's kind of a Venn diagram, we come together in the middle, but ultimately it works out pretty well.
Wonderful. So one thing I want to mention to everybody, I rewatched our interview, from 3 years ago, to prepare for this tonight. And one thing that fascinated me is something that you said about your approach to distilling and what you were trying to accomplish when you got started. And you were both very insistent that you felt that whiskey needs to be aged in very large barrels for long periods of time. Okay, that was one thing that you guys really were talking about, that, you didn't want to put things in smaller barrels, didn't want to rush things to get things out quickly. That's one of the reasons why you were sourcing stuff early on, to wait for it to get ready. So can you tell us a little bit, while we're getting started with the first drink, which is our straight bourbon here. So we're going to start with the straight bourbon. Can you tell us a little bit about your aging process and how long your whiskeys are aging for, and what's your ultimate goal?
Yeah, and the caveat there is, you know, that our goal isn't to shit on small barrel whiskey. There has been plenty of it that's done well and plenty of it that's done poorly, probably more that's been done poorly. But some people really have a good grasp on it. But there are things with small barrels, you know, you're just extracting quicker, but you're not really getting into the chemical process of esterification. You really need a longer maturation for that. So when we started, we knew what we wanted to do ultimately. You know, we have a yeast strain that's very character forward, very congener forward, and there's no way with the way we make our cuts and the yeast we use that we could make a small barrel whiskey taste palatable. So yeah, we had that choice of small barrels, get to market sooner, or source and let our stuff age out. So with the bigger barrels, I mean, our whole goal is to basically let the whiskey do its thing and rest and go through the different seasons and come out when it's ready. Everything we do is a minimum 4-year, but honestly, at this point, it's kind of a de facto minimum 5. Our blends are typically like 5, 6, 7-year-old whiskeys. So if there's any 4-year-old in what you're drinking now, it's nearly 5 years old. We're also not really that hung up on the age statement. I know being a you know, quote unquote craft small distillery, that having a 4-year age statement could be beneficial, but we just kind of want the whiskey to speak for itself. And we don't want that really to be the big focal point, if that makes sense.
Got it. One thing, I love the comments. I don't know if you're reading it right now, but we'll make sure you get a copy of the comments. Todd Coe posted here. This is the first bourbon my wife ever told me she likes. It was a momentous occasion. So way to go. And Todd just gave you the thumbs up on that. Can you tell us a little bit about the mash bill of this bourbon? What are the grains that are going here?
The mash bill is 72% corn, 23% rye, and 5% malted barley. The rye and the corn, we get all of that from a single farm that's in Byron, Illinois, just southwest, I believe, of Rockford. Just kind of a farmer we developed a relationship with, and he geeks out about this stuff too. So we get our malted barley from Breese up in Wisconsin, but yeah, we know we could get grain maybe cheaper with more starch in Iowa and some other states, but we really want to be Illinois centric in what we do. It's not to say it's better or worse. It's just, that's kind of why we got into this. You know, we want it to be about the environment that we're actually doing this in.
And to echo Mike on that, you know, that's kind of probably the common theme you'll hear from us is, you know, when we started, I mean, we were whiskey nerds well before we opened a distillery. We were deep into Scotch, actually. We were big Scotch guys, first and foremost. And then we got into American whiskey. But when we, you know, left our day jobs to do this together, you know, we knew right away, we're going to do this and we want to do it our way. And that's, you know, big barrel, long age time. Like Mike said, you know, we're not calling anybody's baby ugly, but that's how we wanted to do it. We want to do it the traditional way. So we said, we're going to do big barrels, long age time. I mean, we've got stuff that's sitting in the rick house now that's, you know, knocking on 10 years old. And we've got single malt coming out at some point. So we've got a lot of older whiskeys that are still aging. But when it comes to the grains, you know, we're only 15, 20 minutes from Iowa. We've had a lot of Iowa farms reach out to us and tell us and show us how they can save us a lot of money on corn. But it was just one of those things. We said, if we're doing this in Illinois, we want to make it Illinois centric. We want to use everything we can from our state. So we've really stuck to our guns over the past 9 years, stuck to our guns, even though there might've been some cost saving efficiencies, you know, peppered in. We've still done it our way.
What about the barrels? Where do you get your barrels from?
Lebanon, Missouri, from Independent Stave.
Yeah, so Independent Stave. Yeah, others. Yeah, others.
Barrels in Illinois, but yeah. No, those guys actually, these guys.
Oh, very good. Yes, Independent Stave. Yes,
my favorite hats. But they're a great company to work with. We got in with them pretty early on and got in with them at just the right time, because now it's very hard for distilleries our size that have opened over the past 2 to 8 years or whatever. It's really hard for them to find barrels. So we got in with them at just the right time, and we've had a great relationship. So we've done some test barrels for them and things like that. So yeah.
Got it. So somebody actually asked about your barrels. Like, when are your barrels used by Galena Roasters?
Yes, they are.
They are.
Anything he's done bourbon, rye aged, and rum. Actually, the rum barrel aged ones he just did recently are actually my favorite. They're pretty cool. But
nice.
Yes, if you're a coffee nerd, Galena Roasters is the coffee roasting nerd of Galena. He's awesome and makes the best coffee in the area.
He's basically like the coffee equivalent of us. He just wants to do it, the hard way and the right way.
Right.
So he's making some great coffee.
Right. Matthew, what's your favorite Scotch? Because Mike has already responded in the chat that his favorite is Springbank, and I hate the word, favorite, just because we all have different moods. But what do you reach for when you're in the mood?
Honestly, I'm in, and this also speaks to a lot of the products we put out, but I'm, I know favorite, it's tough, different spirits for different occasions. It's different than if I'm sitting here, in my little room at home. It's different if I'm sitting at a fire, outside next to somebody. But I think I gravitate more towards, the finished scotches, the Glenmorangie and the Balvenie, the different casks that they finish them in. I tend to enjoy those a little more, but those are kind of the everyday Scotch drinkers.
Yeah, sure.
I do love a good Laphroaig or Lagavulin under the right circumstances, and obviously Springbank, like Mike said, Springbank can't do anything wrong. So
I would agree with you 100% on that. So very, very good. So let's talk a little bit more about this. So the bourbon, the straight bourbon, obviously you said that things are starting to get older. Okay, it used to be 4 years, now there's 5 year stuff in here. Are you guys trying to make the straight bourbon and the straight rye the same each year, or are you trying to improve upon it each year? Like, how are you handling the fact that the bottle always says straight rye or straight bourbon?
A little of both. I think consistency is more what we're going for. So when blending, that's like an interesting concept to think about, is sometimes you could sit down with so many barrel samples and you could say, I just came up with this blend, really good. This is fantastic, but is it our house style, right? So we do want to provide that consistency. If you get a bottle of our bourbon, maybe the next batch you get will have a little bit of older stuff in it, but we don't want it to be like, oh, that batch is so much better than this one, and this one tastes different than that batch. And I think that's kind of the art of blending, is being able to improve upon it, but also provide that consistency of house style.
So how many barrels go into each one of these? So since you are blending different barrels together for your straight bourbon and your straight rye, but how many barrels are going into each?
About 8 per batch.
Okay.
That's our small batch is actually small batch. So
very nice.
Yeah, typically 8, but it can be anywhere from 5 to 10.
Got it. And on your website, it says that both of you like to enjoy this neat, and I agree with you completely. I think that this drinks beautifully, has a nice spice to it, has a little bit of heat. For those of you who don't like the heat, you might want to add a little bit of water to it, if it's a little bit too hot for you. But I think that this is absolutely beautiful, and I love it. So let's go on to the rye. Okay, so are you getting the rye from the same place? Is that what you said, the same place as you're getting the corn?
Yes. Yep. It's that's actually how we started the relationship with him. We've worked with other farmers, but we've gotten our rye from this guy since day one. And it's he essentially was planting it as a cover crop. It's a strain from Canada, and he doesn't recall what it was. So all we know is it's our proprietary Canadian strain that we don't know what it is. And it is very character forward, though. It's very smoky. It's very earthy. And that's just a lot of the quality that we've come to like in the rye. The rye and the bourbon are just completely different animals, and that's
very different.
by
Very
design.
different. So tell us about the mash bill in here.
We started doing rye originally as 92% rye, 5% cherrywood smoked malt.
Oh, wow.
Rest distiller's malt. But I'd say about 5 years ago, we switched to 100% rye. The current batch, I think we're to the point we're just about all phased out of the non-100% rye. But
okay.
chances are what you guys have has a little bit of smoked malt in it.
Okay, so the goal ultimately is that you're going to be doing, your straight rye will be 100% rye.
Yeah, and the main reason is Matt talked about how we've done experimental stuff with Independent Stave, and we actually did a run of 100% rye to put in these barrels that they made that were smoked on the inside with different types of wood. Just as a control, we didn't want the smoked malt to influence it, and we ended up just really liking how it turned out as 100%. We thought a lot of the smoke was coming from the smoked malt, but we were pleasantly surprised to find out that most of that character comes from the rye itself.
And is any of the rye malted, or you're not doing the malting with the rye?
No,
so it's not malted rye.
Nope.
Fascinating. Because a lot of people like to add to their rye, they like to add like 5% malted barley, just to take off a little bit of the bite from rye. But this rye doesn't have that bite.
Kind of like our bourbon, Mike and I bottled the rye and the bourbon both at 90 proof and at 100 proof, and dabbled with different mash bills and whatnot, but just felt that both of them were better at 100 proof. We could have done it at 90 proof and stretched the inventory out a little bit, but we just thought it was better. We both, I think probably coming from the world of Scotch originally, I think we both really gravitate more towards higher proof stuff. So, but yeah, we love when people try our rye and say, oh, wow, this is really, really light and approachable and very smooth. And, it's like, oh, it's 100 proof and 100% rye, where, we take that compliment any day.
Yeah, no, this is wonderful stuff. I got to tell you that other people must also like your rye, because I have trouble finding it on the shelves. The rye seems to sell out faster than the bourbon does, because I can usually find the bourbon, but I have trouble finding the rye. It's killing me.
Yeah, right. It seems like over the past year or two that rye as a category has kind of died down a little bit. At least that's kind of what we're seeing. But it's still, we make probably 3 to 4 times as much bourbon as we do rye, just because that's where the people are interested in buying it. But I don't know. We're both really big fans of the rye. It's a pretty fun one.
Got it. So we actually have a few people on here who are mixed drink geeks, and I noticed from your website that you both like to enjoy this neat or in a Sazerac. Okay, so in your Sazerac, what's your recipe? What bitters do you use and stuff like that?
Oh, we're classic. So Peychaud. And the absinthe rinse is with absinthe that we make, actually. So
actually, the absinthe rinse is with absinthe that we make, that we actually grow our own botanicals for.
Oh, so wow.
We grow
the wormwood and a few others, not the anise. We grow the things that are conducive to this climate. But yeah, it is kind of, again, that brings it back to the whole Illinois thing is
right.
Illinois
is the absinthe available in retail, or only can it be purchased maybe at your distillery or any other place?
It was available at the distillery. We've never distributed it, but we've been out of it, and we're about to do a new batch of it. So we've got a lot of absinthe fans that have come by, and occasionally, if we get the right person comes in that really know absinthe, we'll sell them a bottle from the bar. But we are going to put that back out here pretty soon. We're going to do a new batch of it.
Got it. I have a hunch that there are several people on here who might have to run over to Galena. So when is the next batch of absinthe going to be available?
Realistically in the fall. I mean, because we'll make it and we like to tank rest it for 6 months or so.
Got it. Understood. By the way, I'm curious, where is Blaum Brothers available for sale? You know, in what states are you guys available right now?
Right now we're in Illinois, Wisconsin, Colorado, Tennessee, Kentucky,
Georgia.
uh,
That's it.
that's it.
I think Missouri.
Not Missouri yet.
Not by our design.
Yeah. No, there might
Thought
be
I saw
bottles
some.
floating around. There might be some bottles floating around. Who knows?
Well, like Total Wine. So
Missouri is kind of like a weird state. Like we deal with some control states that are very, very difficult to deal with. And then there's easy states like Missouri where you can like pull up back up a truck to the side of the road and sell your bourbon.
I love states like that. I'm from Pennsylvania originally, and it's such a pain in the ass, because it's a liquor control board state, and you just can't get anything good there. And then they have lotteries to buy good stuff. It's just a total pain in the ass. Are there any countries other than the U.S. in which you're available, or are you still 100% domestic?
Just the United States and Peru.
Peru.
I'm just kidding.
Peru. Why Peru?
I was just trying to think of something random.
I think Peru, because we occasionally get those scam emails of people wanting to put our spirits in their hotel in some South American country or something.
Yeah.
Understood. Do you
We've only fallen for it 4 times.
only 4 times?
Never again.
And they promise you that they're going to send you some Bitcoin. They say you're going to get it for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. By the way, what about single barrels? You guys do any single barrels? When we spoke a few years ago, you said you do a few of them, but that is not a big thing that you do yet. I want to know if that's become a bigger part of your business. Are you doing any single barrels for retailers or clubs?
Well, your timing is impeccable.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, we've in the past we did some single barrels with the Old Fingal Nodder bourbon and the Nodder rye, and actually right now we're just starting now to sprinkle out some single barrels. We've talked to a few groups, talked to a few places. There's a 2-store chain in Chicago, not a chain, but 2-store entity in Chicagoland, Gold Eagle, that is receiving 2 single barrels actually. Jake from Gold Eagle came out, visited the distillery, went to our rick house with us, and we were planning on doing 1 single barrel with him, and he fell in love with 2, and he couldn't make up his mind. And after we had drank a bunch of whiskey with him, Mike and I are like, whatever, do 2.
Now, are they both bourbon, or is it bourbon and rye? What's Gold
Those
Eagle?
are rye. Those are both rye. And
when are they getting? When's Gold Eagle getting those?
They just shipped out this week. And actually, speaking of rye, one of those barrels is a completely different mash bill that we never intended to do as a single barrel, but he really liked it. So every year we do about 10 barrels of a wheated bourbon, and we do 10 barrels of a low rye. So 52% rye, the rest corn.
Oh, wow.
So he'll be releasing 2 barrels. One's 7 years old. That's the kind of odd mash bill for us. And the other's 8 years old, and that's 100% rye.
Well, I think that several of us are going to be emailing and texting back and forth about this very soon. So thank you for that information.
They're all over 130 proof too. So
yeah, there's that too.
Okay, well, okay, that's fine. That's why we have water. That's why we have orange Fanta. I mean, you never know, So,
single barrels are now starting to happen.
Okay, great, wonderful. We did our group has done 1 single barrel. Eric and I found out it was a ridiculous amount of work. We still want to do more, but it was just a lot of work. We did a single barrel with a Starward Australian single malt, and it went really well. It was delicious. It actually won double gold in San Francisco. But Eric and I have full-time jobs, and although I'm an empty nester, he still has kids at home, so we have to figure out how to balance all that stuff. But we would definitely like to do more single barrels, but it's just a lot of work. Yeah, it's difficult. So you were talking about finishing whiskeys and then aging them differently. So let's go on to our 3rd sample. And our 3rd sample, this fascinates me. Straight rye whiskey, 6 years, finished in an apple brandy cask. All right. Talk to us about this. Mike?
Basically, we've started collaborating more with this area has a bunch of local wineries, but there's one in particular that is really good at what they do. And we wanted to find some ways to collaborate. And we just found that their kind of apple brandy wine that they work on, it just kind of paired well with the spice of the rye. So we got 2 of their casks and blended, basically chose 2 barrels that were on the drier side, just to kind of, because I knew it was going to pick up some sweetness. And we put it in the barrels and sat and waited, and it kind of became something, you know, when we'd have regular customers and friends and acquaintances come, those are barrels we'd pull out of and got people really excited. And then it just kind of became a thing. And we actually later this year, we're going to have more, a peach brandy finish and a cherry wine finish, actually. So
This is fascinating. So let me ask you a question about this. So the rye was a 6-year rye, and then after the 6 years in the regular oak cask, you then moved it to the apple brandy cask?
5 years when it went into the cask, 6 when it comes out. And we were only allowed to do that because of the new regs that came out 2 years ago, I think, saying that the finishing cask can be part of the age statement.
Okay, got it. So 5 and 1. I got it. I'm getting candied apple. You know, there's something, you know, about that fall candied apple thing going here. With the rye, this is freaking delicious. I would almost think of maybe using this in a cocktail or something. You know, there's something about it that's fruity and sweet. How do you guys like to drink this?
I like drinking this one neat. I think with finishes, while we are fans of finishes, there are plenty of finished whiskeys that it's like more a double maturation. It's kind of too heavy. With this one, it's nuanced. It's there, but it's not overpowering. So I think drinking it neat, in my opinion, just kind of really lets you focus on the play between the brandy and the whiskey.
Matt, what about you?
Same thing. I love this one neat. Room temp. Nothing. I mean, there are a lot of our expressions that I like that way. Obviously, there are some, you know, that we're cocktail guys too. We've got a cocktail bar at the distillery that has, you know, some amazing cocktails, but normally when it's something like this, you know, it goes back to our big time Scotch days, and not like we're not still into Scotch, but you know, I just love finished whiskey, and this one's great for drinking.
I'm curious, you know, so with something like this, and then given that you have the brew pub there, and they have the bar at the distillery and all that, do you ever make a cocktail with one of these types of whiskeys? You know, with one of the finished ones, or are your cocktails only with the straight rye and the straight bourbon?
I mean, that's a good point. We haven't really done any cocktails with any of these finished ones, other than, like, you know, we did a Madeira finished bourbon back when we were doing MGP, but it's the kind of thing we only hold back so much for the bar, but it's the kind of thing that we'd probably do like a monthly special, and if we come up with something really good that works out.
Yeah, I got to tell you, I would encourage you to do that, because there's something about this. I love it neat, but there's something about this that also says to me it would be great in, you know, a Manhattan or an old fashioned, something like that. You know, there's something about it that's rich and fruity that really would add something to that type of cocktail.
We do allow people on our menu, if they want an old fashioned or a Manhattan or something like that. We do have a upgrade option that they can use something like this in it, but yeah, we don't have any specialty cocktails that revolve completely around one of these one-off things.
Well, bars love upgrades, you know. Bars and profit margins, Mr. MBA, love upgrades. So yeah, cheers to that one. Now this is wonderful. So let's talk a little bit about the apple brandy itself. So is this the apple brandy? You said it's also made in Galena, is that correct?
Yes, what I believe is it actually started as a Calvados barrel, and then yes, they aged out some apple brandy in it. It's one of the local wineries. So I don't think it's apple brandy they made. They actually ended up turning it into like a dessert wine.
Oh.
But we were
almost like a fortified wine product.
Yeah, yeah, sort of like that. Yeah.
Huh. That might explain the richness. It's like a little syrupy, you know. It's yeah. There's something great here. Yeah, I'm really
and that's
enjoying
more
this.
reason I think if the finish were heavier, it could get a bit cloying and a little too sweet. And we're not you know, we don't, even with the rum, we don't back sweeten anything.
We like, you know, we like to have, you know, that essence and that hint of whatever it is, but we don't want it to overpower our spirit. But we this apple brandy rye, we actually got barrels also from Galena Cellars, peach brandy barrels and cherry brandy barrels. So those two, we're going to do cherry brandy finished rye and a peach brandy finished rye. Those are both coming out over the next 3 months.
Got it. So let's move on to our fourth sample, and then after that, we'll open it up for questions to the crowd because we're getting a lot of comments in the chat, a lot of good questions here. And actually, Mike, I appreciate that you're trying to answer them while we're talking here, so that really helps.
Better than me. I'm a terrible multitasker, so I'm just going in on this. I'm like, all right, Mike's got the question answered.
No, that's beautiful. I like the interplay. It's perfect. So cigar blends, you know, obviously the most popular, most, you know, on the shelf that everybody knows about is Dalmore. Okay, the Dalmore cigar blend. It's, you know, it's really rich. It's, you know, it's got the really dark color. Where it gets that color from, well, we can talk about that. You know, is it added or not? But we're not here to talk about Dalmore. We're here to talk about your cigar blend bourbon. Please tell us why you call it a cigar blend and how does it get this color?
So we actually added, we actually cut up about 1,000 pounds of cigars and put them in the still. You're not buying
No, no. I did not buy that for a second.
All right, go ahead, Mike.
Come on, man.
The real answer is we called it that because we didn't know we would get asked that question 80 times a day. Because if we had known that, we would have called it something else probably. You're actually the first one to bring up Dalmore, and that is the inspiration. Well,
how can I be the first one to bring that up? That's
because there are a number of, we found this out after the fact. There are some other domestic distilleries that have used that term. So somebody was like, oh, well, that, you named that after, like, what is it? Joseph Magnus, that blend.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so there are a handful called that. And then people ask, so what makes it that, you know, so you must finish it in Armagnac and Cognac? And the answer is no. We picked that name because it was a very small blend of just extremely rich barrels that we came across.
Like 3 barrels.
What you're tasting is just a 3-barrel blend.
So this is your regular. Okay, so let's talk about this. So this is your regular bourbon, and you just found a few casks that came up to be really, really rich.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Fascinating. So you didn't age it any differently?
No, Mike discovered these barrels and found a few unique barrels, and he blended them together and brought them to me and said, "Try this. This is kind of a little different than what we usually have." And Mike ultimately, you know, said, "You know, this tastes like it would go really well with the cigar." So we named it Cigar Blend.
No, I love that. I got to tell you, years ago, I was at a Macallan tasting in the late 90s, believe it or not, and they had that year the 18 Grand Reserve. Okay, and the master blender was there. And what was fascinating is that he told us that when he was tasting the barrels for the 18, he found a few barrels that he thought were too good to be in the 18. That should be separated out, and he created the 18 Grand Reserve from that. So, you know, I like that, you know, when you were tasting these barrels, that you were like, hey, this is a little special. You know, let's do something with that. So this is a limited edition, right? So this is
it's a limited edition, and of course, with anything we do that's limited that people really dig, they're like, so you're going to replicate that again, right? Not that easy to do. We did come across a few more barrels, and actually there will be a next batch, but this one will be, it's actually marrying in a cognac punch-in right now. So it'll be very similar character to what you're tasting, but it'll have that little bit more refinement from the cognac.
Got it. But by the way, has anybody ever believed you, Matt, when you told them about
Yes.
breaking up 1,000 cigars?
1,000%. Yeah. Actually,
People have believed you?
yeah. That's usually
Not whiskey nerds, like when you're at a show or something. Yeah.
You're at a show or something. And I my favorite part is while I started that, I glanced at Mike and he's like, here we go. That's my go-to. Anytime anybody asks, I just start rambling about putting cigars in the still. And yeah.
No, Matt, you should just tell people that you put cigars in the gin basket when you're doing the distillation.
There you go. Yeah.
Nice. But by the way, is this available for purchase? And actually, these two bottles, the last two here. So the apple brandy rye and the cigar bourbon, are these available anywhere other than the distillery?
Both of those are now gone. I mean, those are both.
But there will be new batches coming out.
There will be new batches eventually coming out, but those two expressions you guys have, we literally just sent to you guys because we thought they'd be fun to taste.
Got it. So the new ones, when the new ones come out, are they only at the distillery, or will they be available here as well in Chicago?
We're going to start releasing some to Chicago.
Yeah. In the past, we've really done a lot of distillery only releases. I mean, part of that is, admittedly, part of it is, when we send a bottle out to distribution, we lose 60% of the margin on that.
Right.
So yeah, part of it was like, well, this is really fun, and this is only, X amount of bottles, smaller batch. Let's just sell the distillery. And we've done a lot of that, but I think now we've kind of also realized that there are a lot of people out there that love whiskey and love bourbon, love rye, that can't make it to Galena to stand in line for 2 days.
Yeah.
We tend to get giant lines and things like that, and we realize there are a lot of people, and we're not hitting our entire market. So
I've actually seen the lines I've seen the photos on Facebook. You guys post sometimes where we see the lines of people waiting for the special releases. So one thing I will tell you about this group does like to buy things like this. So when you know that you are going to be putting something out here in Chicago, if you could let us know, and we'll let our people know.
Yeah, the easiest way is if any of you aren't following us already, to follow us on Facebook, Instagram, all the socials. We tend to do all our releases on social media. We'll put up a release, but we'll also put up a post to alert the public that we'll be putting it out through distribution as well. Most of the one-off products that we are planning on releasing through distribution as well will mostly be in Illinois. Mm-hmm. There might be some that hit some of our other markets that we're doing really well in, like Tennessee, or it ultimately just depends. But
yeah, well, most of us in this group are in Illinois. Most of us are Chicagoland based.
Yeah,
so that'll work. So awesome. So what I want to do right now is I want to open it up for questions. Everybody knows about the raise hand function. We're first going to go to Eric Leader, my partner in crime. Eric, look at that. I remembered to ask you if you had a question. Isn't that shocking?
Yes, thank you. I guess the one question is, what are you guys excited about in the next 6 months? I mean, you talked about all these really cool things that you've done, but what can we expect besides the cherry and the other one that we were talking about earlier?
I would say, honestly, for both of us, malt whiskey, American single malt. We've been making malt since day one. We have malt that has been full maturation in sherry butts, and it's hit 9 years old. And
oh, wow.
Our plan with the malt is kind of like we do with the rum. We don't make it the cheap way. I mean, the malt, we bring in malt from the UK, and the malted barley, sorry. And we have been sitting on it, making it all the time, every year. Not tons. I mean, we probably have a good 100-some barrels of malt across different ages, but the plan is every year around October, November, December is to release a batch of malt whiskey. And with that, it's not necessarily going for consistency of character. Like one year it might be a heavily peated sherry finish style. Next year it might be, you know, just straight up Golden Promise malt in ex-bourbon casks. So that's like, hey, my cats are fighting. That's like Matt said, that's what got us into whiskey really is malt. So that's the one that we've kind of kept off the pro forma as far as like, we're going to release this when it hits 6. It's kind of been, we're going to release it when we think it's ready. And it so happens that our 10-year anniversary is coming up this December, and I think we think we'll have a batch ready by then.
Awesome. Great. So we have several questions here. The first one hand up was Josh Eisenberg. Josh, if you could please unmute.
Hey, thanks for the question. Love this. This has really been a great session. I'd love to just know more about your discovery process to get to the yeast that you talked about at the beginning of the program. Just how long did it take you to kind of identify, hey, we have something special here? And is there anything else you can share about the yeast? Because it really, I'd love to know a little bit more about that as part of your process.
So yeah, the short answer is we experimented early on with a bunch of different yeast strains. The hard thing about making big barrel whiskey though is then how many years you have to sit and wait for the results, right? So it's kind of a funny story. When we released our first batch of rye, it was actually 2 years old, and it was a one-off called Fever River Rye. And it's still a rye that people come in and ask for, and get plenty of people saying like, hey, are you going to replicate that again? The thing is that rye came from all the experimentation. So there are like 8 different yeast strains that made that rye up in a bunch of different finishing barrels, and definitely something we're, you know, that's not feasible to replicate. But you experiment with rye, you find there's this one that may yield more, but it's a little more neutral in flavor. That would be best suited for, you know, a short age and a smaller barrel. And then there's a specific strain we use for the bourbon and the rye, which I assume they still use it, but we found out it's the same strain that Buffalo Trace uses, funny enough. Used to be called Red Star Whiskey Yeast. It's made by Fermentus, and it's called, what's it called nowadays? USW6. It's a very character forward yeast, and you would have to be a wizard to make it palatable before 4 years. I'll tell you that, because it's got so much going on early on.
Got it. Beautiful. All right. So the next question we have is Todd Coe. And by the way, Todd and I learned about your products while pouring whiskey at a fundraiser for a homeless shelter that we support. I thought we talked about it last time, that Brett Pontani helps us curate that table every year at that fundraiser. And that's where we first learned about Blaum Brothers years ago. So Todd, take it away.
Yeah, Paul just called me a Blaum super fan, and I suppose I am. But I have a very nerdy question about water. I've done the tour. Very nerdy question from this group. Go figure. I've done the tour out at your place a couple of times, and the guide talks a lot about the limestone water, just like they have in Kentucky. Like Galena sits on limestone as well. And I'm wondering if you're just using that local water for your fermentation, or are you also using that local water to like proof down from cask strength, or are you using RO water for that?
Well, so we're using RO water across the board, from city water through RO. It's kind of, that's one of those things I think, one or two tour guides like start reading about it and they add that in about the limestone. The funny thing is when Matt and I have gone like on distillery tours in Kentucky or wherever, and they start going on about the limestone, I kind of like roll our eyes like, come on, it all goes through reverse osmosis. So even though that's like a romantic thing that the one or two of the tour guides might talk about, you'll never hear me be like, oh, we moved to Galena because of the limestone. Does it have an impact on the water before it goes into the RO system? Sure, but if the RO system's doing its job, it doesn't really matter what goes into it. So unfortunately, that's, We don't tap dance and give romantic answers. That's the real one. But we do have a lot of limestone. So there you go.
We have a ton of limestone. And we do have one tour guide that talks about that a lot. And unfortunately, right now he suffers from a little bit of dementia, but we love him so much. We're keeping him on board, and we
not going to correct him every day.
Not going to correct him every day. It's
is that too much hard water? Is that?
Yeah.
Before the RO.
Right. Exactly. Exactly. Todd, since you're a super fan, do you have any other questions before we move on to the next person?
No, I'm good, I think, unless I can get the secret skinny on what the next barrel finish is coming out and when I can be first in line.
Well, the next one will probably be it'll be the peach brandy finished rye or the cherry brandy finished rye. We just got both those labels approved by the government. I believe they're both bottled. We just need to order some labels and get them going. But I would guess I could confidently say those two expressions will be released to the public within the next 3 months.
But Todd, if you come visit, we'd be happy to pour you some pre-release.
Yeah, got some in bottles already, Todd. So just swing on out.
I'm getting in the car right after this.
Todd, shotgun. All right. Paul, please unmute.
And put the bucket back on your head, Paul.
That's my fancy Revolution hat, okay? It's not just a bucket. Also, yeah, it's not just a bucket. Also, I apologize. I'm kind of working around a cat right here, but you know how that goes.
That happens.
We have
a distillery cat named Mark that lives there 24 hours a day.
Mark? That's fantastic. This guy's name is Tom.
Nice.
We got very simple names going on over here. It's great.
Yep.
They also failed to mention that I always ask 2 or more questions, so I apologize in advance. But question number 0.5 is, what malt are you bringing in from Scotland? Any Maris Otter? And I know that you mentioned, that the other thing that it varies over time, but I'll keep that question anyway. And then what is your philosophy on barrel entry proof and fermentation times?
Cool. Let's see if I can remember all the questions. The first one, what malt are we bringing in? It's been a wide variety of malts. Early on, we were playing with things like Optic. We mostly, the one we've stuck with really over the past few years is Golden Promise. That's just been one that's very, in Scotland, they moved away from these for a long time, past few decades. They're more flavorful, but the yield is not as good. So that's kind of why they've gravitated away. We have done some Maris Otter. We actually, any of the Maris Otter we've done was actually floor malted just like 40 minutes away from where I used to live. I used to live over in the UK. So it's actually kind of cool. Like it's right near where I lived and we're bringing it in from there. So yeah, haven't.
I know it's not Port Ellen maltings because that would be the entire island 40 minutes away.
Right. And we've, some heavily peated stuff. But like I said, we just like to tinker. But really, Golden Promise is kind of our go-to, I'd say. Damn it! See, I told you. And
then those other questions were about fermentation time.
Philosophy on barrel entry proof and fermentation times.
Barrel entry proof. We started out going in kind of like splitting the difference between 110 and 125. We were going in at 117. Subsequently moved down to 110 just to, based on the climate and the yeast and everything, we just want to go in lower nowadays and target like the water soluble wood sugars for a little more sweetness. And it also is impacted by the environment. So over time, we found that when we initially were aging all of our barrels in the actual production facility, we were going up in proof significantly. That's why some of the single barrels we just talked about are like 138, right? But that's kind of one of the reasons we dropped down to 110 over the past few years. We do have a new warehouse we've had for 4 years now, and I actually just finally took a sample of like the first barrel we put in there that's been there its entire time, and it's after 3.5 years, it's gone down to proof as opposed to up. So then, of course, that gets us thinking like, okay, well, do we want to rethink the barrel entry proof? But realistically, really that kind of like 110, 115 range is what we like. Going in at 125, I mean, realistically, the big places do it because you can fit more proof gallons into a barrel. It's more cost effective. It has kind of created a style that people have come to know bourbon to be. I mean, that was up until, 1964, you couldn't go in above 110. But since they changed that to 125, that's kind of changed what bourbon is in a way. So while the cost savings are there going in at the max proof, we just, we've done some at 100 proof and some at 105, some at 110, and we just kind of like that 110 range. Fermentation times, 3 days and 5 days, just based upon our production schedule. So we're not having to do stuff on the weekend.
Nice. Very, very good. Wonderful. Paul, have your questions been answered?
Definitely.
Wonderful. I'm just letting everybody know, I think we're going to go about a little bit after 8 o'clock, if that's okay with you, Mike and Matt, because we have some good questions going here, and I love these discussions. Terry Dinterman. Terry, please unmute. Thank you.
Hey, guys. First of all, for anybody that likes a Bloody Mary, this Hellfire is, you shouldn't have a Bloody Mary if you're not drinking with the Hellfire. It's really top-notch product there. So I'm sort of the anti-nerd question here. My son actually got married at Ashton Hill Farms last year. So I was at Blaum Brothers, I don't know, half a dozen times in 2022. And every time I was there, we did the tour a couple times, but a great bar, as has been mentioned. Love the cocktails and creativity that you have going there. But the parking lot was always just packed. Thankfully, I had a 4-wheel drive pickup truck because I was parking in the mud. Any plans to expand the parking there?
Yeah. That's been a thing for several years now. We, especially on the weekends, we tend to fill the parking lot. And I mean, we've had a lot of events where people started parking on the shoulder of the highway in front of the building. But yes, there is a plan. We actually had to meet with the Illinois Department of Transportation to get approval to change the whole, right now it's just one entrance and exit. Right. We're actually eventually going to have one entrance down at one end and an exit at the other. And, the other problem we have with that actually, Terry, is we get a lot of semis that come in to drop off barrels or pick up pallets of product or whatever it might be. And when the parking lot's that full, it's tough for those trucks to, sorry, Siri's talking now. It's tough. It's really tough for them to back in and to get into the parking lot. So yes, the short answer is yes.
Terry, I'm blown away. Every once in a while we get a question that we've never had before, and I never expected a question like that. So, it's a
valid question.
It's a great question. Yeah. Terry, do you have any questions about the whiskey?
Just one more. So, as you were talking about thinking about the different proof going into the barrel, with climate change, it seems to be a real thing where you have a very mild winter. Does that affect the whiskey?
Yeah, I mean, literally everything climate related affects it. I mean, not just temperature, but humidity, barometric pressure. And that is one of the fascinating things, especially since I pulled that sample the other day, is up until we started putting things in the warehouse, and the warehouse has no insulation, no climate control. So when it's cold, it gets really cold in there. When it's hot, it gets really hot. And that will absolutely change the character of our whiskey over time. So what you're tasting now has been, matured entirely in quote unquote, climate controlled. There are fluctuations based on the production, but no extremes. So a lot of people ask, like, well, is that going to make it better? And the answer is going to make it different. Don't know. It's exciting to find out, but we'll know when we get there.
Great. Wonderful. Thank you. Michael Nolan, please unmute.
Gentlemen, thank you very much for participating tonight and telling us so much about your distillery. I've got a question that I'm asking because I know there's got to be a story behind it. I was going through your website and clicked on the tours, and it notes that if your name is Gus, you get a free tour. What is that about?
It's because it's the same reason why the text on our back labels is nonsensical, because we usually write that stuff. We just get together and turn our phones off and drink and come up with that. So we literally just sat down one day and started writing on the website, and I don't know. We just put that on there to see if anybody would bite. And I think over the years, we've probably had about 5 people who come in and show us their ID, and their name's Gus. And
we've had about 5 or 6 people that have come in, and
is it Gus,
really
or
no more to it than that?
Is it straight up Gus, or like Augustine, or
just Gus? If your birthday, just Gus, not nickname. Yeah, we've had a handful in.
Okay,
that's awesome.
I wish there was a better story, but it's just alcohol related.
If you
that's what makes.
If you ask about anything that we have in writing, it's usually we're just entertaining ourselves for the most part.
Well, I was going to say it's just like this saying, no good story came from having salad. So
there you go.
Michael, what about you? Any whiskey questions?
Nope.
Okay. Fine. No problem with that. I love this crowd. Good people. William Myers, what do you have? 8 questions tonight?
No, but I do have a whiskey related question.
Awesome.
Actually, it's more barrel management. I presume that you guys reuse your spent bourbon barrels for your malt products and other type things?
Yep.
Okay. So this is more academic then, but since you are former Scotch guys, which I'm a Scotch guy, but now do bourbon, what is your opinion on barrel rinsing?
Oh,
since I'm guessing you guys don't do it because it doesn't apply, but for those that do.
Who just wrote about this recently? Chuck Cowdery or someone?
No. It was, what's her name? That used to be at Malt at.
I think he reposted it, but.
He might have, yeah. I could see Chuck doing that.
So the funny thing is, the tour guide we've had the longest, he's like 80, and since day one he's always talked on the tour about Jim Beam and the Devil's Cut and all that, which we've always been like, quit talking about other brands on the tour, but he still does it to this day. And I didn't realize how prevalent it was until I just read that article earlier this week, and how that's impacting the Scotch whiskey industry. It's very fascinating. I hadn't even thought about that. I guess it's one of those things, like, it's hard to like get pissed off or emotional about it, even as a Scotch guy. I mean, really, the Scotch industry has had to adapt to what's going on in the US based upon their reliance on barrels. I mean, Prohibition had a major impact on how Scotch character came out over time in their maturation profiles. So I think it's interesting to see what that will do over time. If anything, I think it will have an impact, but it's fascinating. Like I said, I guess having just kind of read the article, I don't know, I don't have any real strong opinions, but it's just not something that's, without the economies of scale and the right equipment, it's not something we could really do.
Right.
They probably extract more whiskey out of their staves than we make in a year, so more power to them.
Right.
Nice.
Okay, thanks.
That's it, William? That's it?
Yeah, that's it. So
God, dude. All right.
I do like the juice though. It's very good. And if you're not already in Missouri, you know, which I almost could swear I saw some of your stuff in it.
We've heard weird things about it popping up in different states, so who knows? It's possible.
Got it.
Okay.
Wonderful.
If not, bring it to Missouri. If not, I can get served from Illinois.
All right. Thank you, William. Okay, so we have a hand up from one of our newer participants, a friend of Ariel Tischer, Mr. Jason Litwack. Jason, please unmute yourself.
Thank you, and amazing tasting. Pretty simple question, but just curious. I found that the bourbon had a much heavier spice level than normally a custom bourbon. Almost dry, cinnamony, heavy. Is that intentional? Is that my palate? Just interested in hearing the process on the bourbon because I find it to be much more flavorful than most bourbons.
It's funny. I'll let Mike talk about that on more of a technical level, but that is something, oddly enough, we hear quite a bit at the distillery bar, that people will do a whiskey flight and they'll get our bourbon, they'll get our rye, they'll get our, the apple brandy rye, they'll get several whiskeys, and they'll say, I felt like the rye was a lot softer and a lot smoother than the bourbon. And we hear that a lot, which is obviously it goes against all logic, with the rye being, 100% rye, which most ryes have a lot of corn in them, and our rye has no corn. So it goes against all logic, but we do hear that quite a bit.
Yeah, and I guess it depends on the day and the changing palate. Like I typically think of our rye as being more heavy and spicy, and the bourbon a little more delicate, but I see what you're saying. There are times I can kind of flip that around. As far as the by design aspect, I mean, it's a product of the choices we made, and I'd say particularly the yeast, I'd say, with our bourbon plays an extremely big role with that character that comes out, and the fact that early on we were going in to the barrel at a slightly higher proof, so like 120. So it's going to pick up more of the wood spice from that. But that'll be interesting, especially since we started going in at 110, and since the new warehouse, we're actually seemingly dropping in proof. It'll be interesting to see what impact that has over time. I just wish I had a time machine, unfortunately.
Wonderful. Jason, does that answer your question?
It did. Thanks very much.
Great, wonderful, great. So a few things before we wrap it up here. So I have to tell you that I have been, I don't want to say that I've been double fisting, because it's really been 5 fists with all the drinks that we have here. Your 4 drinks that you gave us, plus also the gin, because I cannot have the bottle of the gin in front of me without drinking some of it. It's that damn good. But what I'd like to do right now is I would like everybody, if you are so inclined, to pour yourselves another dram. I am going to be finishing off my sample of the apple brandy bourbon, because that to me is a revelation. I just can't believe how delicious it is. I'm usually not one who goes for the sweeter things, but this just really is delicious, and I love it. This was a great lineup of stuff. Everybody, if you could all please unmute, and everybody, if you could please join me in saying cheers and thank you to our special guests, the Blaum brothers.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Cheers. Thank you.
Mike, any last words?
Never eat yellow snow, and don't forget to spay and neuter your pets.
Wonderful. Matt, what about you? Any last words?
The second you said that, I was going to say yellow snow. Never eat yellow snow, or never whittle. No, hold on. I'm going to come up with a
here we
different
go.
one. Yeah, here we go. Never whittle towards yourself or pee against the wind.
Yes. Beautiful. Words of wisdom. Words of wisdom from the Blaum brothers. Everybody, please hang around for the after party. Cheers and thank you very much. Eric,